So the ladies on The View are still saying very questionable things. Let's be nice and put it that way. They're going to talk here about Kamala Harris, and I don't even need to set this up any further. Just listen to them, and then we'll respond.
She's not really been able to do either, and I feel like she hasn't broken through on major policy accomplishments. And she will, fairly or unfairly, be the most scrutinized vice president in history because she's running with the oldest president running for president.
And she's also a black woman.
But I think you have to be able to fairly critique the vice president of the United States without just saying it's the color of their skin or the fact she's a woman.
But it is part of it.
Why? What makes you say that?
Well, we're in the United States of America.
But like with someone like me saying it, do you think I could have a legitimate policy of
No, it's not you. It's just we're in the United States of America, and black women, and this is just not me saying it. I mean, there have been studies. Black women are considered less articulate. They are considered uglier. They are considered all of these
She's
things
beautiful, I would.
by you know, this country, and it's because of the history, of course, of misogyny and
But it's also
sexism.
just women. I mean, Jerry Ferraro, back in the day, ran for vice president, and they went after her too.
And that's the misogyny part. But when you mix the misogyny and the racism,
I'm sorry,
it's extra. It's a little extra.
This is the problem, man. First of all, everybody else on that panel is a massive cuck when she starts making that argument. But second of all, if you're a hardcore partisan, it's like you never admit the obvious, right? The obvious reality about Kamala Harris is that she's not a very good politician. She's just not a very good politician. She's not a compelling speaker. She doesn't have a good policy record. Keep it real, the whole reason she was picked by the Biden White House was to give themselves the identity politics immunity of like, I picked a black woman for VP. Look at us. We're super progressive. Black woman VP. It's an attempt to like deflect criticism without actually having to do any policy work. And that's where we are. And so now, of course, she's going to be heavily scrutinized. Biden's 5,000 years old and on the brink of death. But apparently, any and all criticism of her is really rooted in racism and sexism. I mean, and it's amazing because then she brings up, whatever, Geraldine Ferraro, who she's like, oh, she was attacked too. And I was like, see, it's misogyny, it's sexism. Can't there just be bad female candidates? Like, why is it really that hard to wrap your mind around? It's not like the men get a pass. People shit all over male politicians as they should 24/7. But with a woman, it has to be sexism. It's like with Hillary Clinton. The reason why Hillary Clinton didn't win is because she wasn't a good candidate and she wasn't a good politician.
My issue, actually, and I understand what you're saying, Sonny, about there's definitely no way to look at this without adding sexism and racism to a lot of people that probably take issue with her. I'm not erasing that. As someone who also has a hard time listening to her do speeches because she has this tendency, they call it the word salad, but where she starts to almost, I don't know if she's going off script and ad-libbing or improving, and if that's the case, she needs to stay on script. If it's her speechwriter, they need to change the speechwriter, because when you're 2 years in, they need to protect her more.
Yeah, the clip.
Well, I don't need to go to, I was using that clip to show it, and I think everyone's seen it. When she starts to, well, we'll just show the clip then. It's
the significance of the passage of time. Right? The significance of the passage of time. So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time.
We got to take this stuff seriously as you are, because you have been forced to have to take it seriously.
During Women's History Month, we celebrate and we honor the women who made history throughout history.
She's reading
so
a
it's
prompter.
just well, and if she's reading a prompter, they need to immediately fix that. You are the vice president of the United States. The administration and the president are responsible for protecting her.
Well, I would add that as a lawyer, you're generally told when you're speaking that you speak in threes, because that's what people remember. So if you're going to talk about a car, you talk about the car, the red car, the fast red car. So I think
the fast red car is not threes. The fast red car is 4. What are you talking about? But also, that's quite an excuse for somebody just not being a good speaker, right? Like, because when you're in law school, they tell you gotta like speak in threes, bro. When they're in law school, they tell you have to be horribly uncompelling as a speaker and make it so everybody dislikes you. Oh my god. All right, they got another one here. I haven't seen these other ones yet. We're having fun. Let's keep going. This is fun.
I have a similar theory, and it's borne out when you look at the studies and when you read books like.
Yeah, this is all about studies, man. I've looked at all the studies, and the reason why people don't like Kamala is because they're sexist and racist. Very intellectual.
It's a book that came out a long time ago about she owned property as well, meaning white women owned slaves as well.
What was the year that women got the right to vote? What year did women get the right to vote? In the grand scheme of things, it was very recent historically. It's not like the privilege of white women in the late 1700s and early 1800s was like equal to that of the white landowning men. Like, what are we talking about here? What are we talking about?
I think that women, white women in particular, want to protect the patriarchy here because it's to their benefit. Yeah. They want to make sure.
What does this have to? What does Kamala Harris being a bad public speaker and not a good politician? What does that have to do with the patriarchy? That has nothing to do with the patriarchy. Bro, okay, here, great example. Among Democrats, among Democratic voters, Michelle Obama is a superstar. She's a superstar. So all your arguments about, well, it's racism and sexism, okay, then why does the Democratic base love Michelle Obama? Why is it that even in general election polls, if you put Michelle Obama up against any Republican, she wins? Your racism and sexism theory just falls way, way short.
Their husbands do well. They want to make sure that their sons do well. They want to make sure that their children do well. And they want to make sure that they do well. Most of the women in some of these studies are married white women. And they do fall in line with what their husbands are doing, how their husbands are voting.
I don't know, man. If you think married white women just co-sign everything their husband says, I don't know if you've been up close to see relationships between older white women and older white men. There is certainly not a cosign going on a regular basis. In fact, there's quite a bit of butting heads. And by the way, the statistics bear it out. White men vote overwhelmingly Republican. And white women, it is much more split. It is much more split. Okay, anyway, we don't need to keep going on here, but you guys get the gist of it. I don't know why the mental gymnastics to not admit the most obvious thing in the world. The most obvious thing in the world is she's not a good politician. She's not a compelling speaker. You know, she doesn't know how to rally people to her side. When she launched her presidential campaign, she was viewed as one of the top tier candidates. And the polls showed her as one of the top tier candidates. Then the more she talked, the more her numbers went down. And that's just because she's not a good politician. You know, I remember she made a big deal on the debate stage saying that Donald Trump should be banned from Twitter. She made it like a main theme of her campaign. And I think people just looked at that and thought, even if I agree with banning Donald Trump from Twitter, don't you want to talk about wages? Don't you want to talk about, I don't know, fill in the blank, taxes, foreign policy, you know, bread and butter issues that impact me directly, gas prices, whatever it might be, right? Like, I think people look at that and they go, that seems a little silly. This is going to be the main thrust of your campaign. By the way, what does the government have to do in any way, shape, or form with Twitter? It shouldn't have anything to do with Twitter in any way, shape, or form. And you want the government to force Twitter to ban Trump? Like, she made a big deal out of this, and it just goes hand in hand with how she functions. I mean, top cop Kamala was the top cop in California. And what she was most known for was being anti-weed, which is now, by the way, super unpopular in the entire country, not just among the Democratic base. And she also cracked down on truancy, right? These are not exactly like bread and butter mainstream issues, but even putting the policy stuff aside, she's just not a good politician, right? I don't know why people can't admit the obvious. It's the most obvious thing in the world. And this is not me saying, oh, the Republicans are good or the Republicans are better, because they're not. It's me giving an honest critique of a Democratic candidate. I don't care that she's the VP, right? And by the way, it really speaks how bad of a politician she is that she's the VP and she's still not doing, like, Mayor Pete was beating her in polls when he's the transportation secretary who's been screwing everything up, by the way, and he's still higher in the polls than she is. Although, in my opinion, I think they're kind of equally dislikable for different reasons. But anyway, just admit the obvious. For the love of God, admit the obvious. It's not that difficult. I swear to God. People with the hardcore partisan brainworms, it's like they do these mental gymnastics to try to back up the most ridiculous claims. You can't just state the obvious. Just state the obvious. So, oh, she's Team Democrat, so she must be good, and therefore, if you disagree with her, you're racist and sexist. If anything, this makes people dislike her more. There's this dishonest deflection and obfuscation of real criticism of her as a result of that. Anyway, you guys get the gist of it. totally insufferable. This is probably going to get, I don't know if it's going to get a copyright strike or demonetized or whatever, but usually it's questionable whether or not you could show the View videos. So anyway, show a brother some love. You donate to Patreon below, or tip on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, all that fun stuff, because this might get, might be some consequences for even talking about this segment. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.